Hello and welcome back to another episode of the DD Geopolitics live stream. I am your host, Sarah, and I am joined once again by, I guess he's a show regular now, Elijah Magnier. Elijah, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
We are coming on the heels. We're just going to get right into it because we don't have a ton of time. And thank you again for making the time to have this episode with us. So we're on the heels of a quite the monumental tragedy in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I've kind of brought you on to kind of discuss the implications and then maybe debunk a couple conspiracy theories before I let you leave because they're getting a little bit out of hand. So why don't really quickly, why don't you update our listeners on what we know about the crash itself? Because we got hard landing, water or weather issues, maybe mechanical failure. Are there any updates to that at this time?
Well, first of all, we know what the whole world knows that President Raisi, Foreign Minister Amir Abdullahian was traveling with another six companions, so they were all eight on board of the same helicopter. They went to eastern Azerbaijan, that is the Iranian part of Azerbaijan, and to inaugurate a dam there. And then when they finished after midday, they fly back, all three of them. And normally the colonel, who is the pilot, he has another assistant, another colonel, and a mechanic who is a major. There are three on board. Then they have the head of the protection of the president, his foreign minister, the governor of Azerbaijan, and the also the representative of the Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, who is also the leader or the Friday prayer person in Tabriz, where the helicopter was heading. They've left, and after half an hour, the sky was clear. There was nothing in the sky, but the colonel, the pilot, who is the commander of and the one who decide the route, and the one who decide what the other two helicopters that were behind him should do or should not do, decided that it is important to go up in altitude and to gain more altitude, because he saw that there were clouds coming up on a certain point after half an hour in the air. And all the three helicopters eventually went up. And then after 1 minute or 1.5 minutes, the other two helicopters realized that they were alone. And there was one helicopter missing. That was the one of the president. That basically was the one ahead, and that was taking the lead. So the helicopter went back immediately to circle the area and to check if there is a trace of the helicopter. Now, there is another detail. During the tragedy, during the route, they were in contact. The main helicopter was in contact with the other two helicopters by the communication system, but also by mobile phone with the bodyguard of the president, who is a general, by the way, General Mohammed Musawi, and with the foreign minister Amir Abdullahian, and they were communicating. Plus, there is the helicopter that was communicating with the other two helicopters. And suddenly, after 1.5 minutes, when the helicopter disappeared, all communication stopped. And when the other helicopter with other guests and the head of the office of President Ibrahim Raisi was telling the story that they didn't see anything. But he said a small detail that it was too dangerous to go down. So they landed immediately at the Songun copper mine, because there is a copper mine in the area. They did not go to Tabriz. They remained in the area, and they informed immediately the authorities about what happened and that they've lost the contact with the main helicopter. Now, what happened is explainable because after that is explainable because after a certain period of time, they tried to connect with the people, with everybody on board of the helicopter, and nobody answered. But after a certain time, one person answered. Why they were calling the phone of the colonel, the pilot. And the one who answered was the Imam of Tabriz, the representative of the Grand Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He answered, he picked up the phone and he said that he was not feeling well. And he was asked, with obviously, where are you? What do you see around you? What happened? And the only thing he managed to say that he was not feeling well. He can see trees around him and he doesn't see anything else. And then the communication was stopped. Now, this answer is normal because the person was under shock. And as the helicopter did a crash landing, and we see how the helicopter body was divided, and the bodies were not in one place, and everybody was found inside the helicopter because the tail was separated, then we understand that his concern was not about who is around him, but he was just trying to answer in the total confusion and a state of shock what he could deliver. It is very natural to someone to say, the only thing I can see is are the trees, because this is the area where the helicopter was found, among the trees. And that was correct information. But we don't know how the phone of the colonel was found next to him, because if we take as a face value the information provided by the person in charge of the president's office, who was on board of the second helicopter that returned to look for the president and his companions, then we don't know how this phone was next to the religious representative. And what we don't know also is that why the communication system was working, why they were in the air, and why suddenly all communications stopped and the communication regained with the phone, with the portable phone, after a certain period of time. So there are many questions that the investigators need to answer.
I have a few questions. Can you explain a little bit about the actual trip? So excuse me, sorry guys, I have a little bit of a bias against Azerbaijan because of their close alliances with Turkey and Israel. We do know in the Armenia situation, Iran has started to take more of a role in kind of quelling things and keeping them down. I know that the trip was to the Iranian side of Azerbaijan, but people still, Azerbaijan's not always the most calm and a placid place, and also the fact that Robert Fico was just in Azerbaijan right before his attempted assassination, and that's sort of the thing that people keep on sort of hanging on to.
Yes, well, I think they are mixing apples and pears. First of all, Iran has learned a different kind of strategy. And to give an example, Iran and Turkey are big enemies in Syria, but they are big allies, business allies, in many other places. They're not allies in Azerbaijan, but they are allies in Turkey. They are allies in different other places because Turkey looks after the Iranian economy in relation to the sanctions imposed by the Americans. That is not a secret. There are thousands of Iranian companies working in Turkey, This is the best way to evade the sanctions. And Turkey has been supporting Iran so many years ago by buying of Iran many goods, including energy, and exchanging it with gold or with other material. That the relationship is quite strong between the two countries. Nevertheless, they kill each other in Syria, which is exactly the same with Azerbaijan. With Azerbaijan, there are more than 20 million Azeris in Iran. In fact, the Grand Ayatollah Khomeini, the late Grand Ayatollah Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Revolution, is an Azari. And most of the Iranian officials and religious in the Hausa are Azaris. Therefore, the this bond between Azerbaijan and Iran is quite strong. Nevertheless, there were differences when when Azerbaijan wanted to close the part between Iran and Armenia and Azerbaijan that is offering to Iran the Silk Road that is supposed to go to Europe. And the Azari preferred to close it and to offer Turkey as an alternative. This is when the Iranians were in disagreement with Azerbaijan. However, when Armenia decided to run drills with the Americans and start voicing that Armenia wants to be part of NATO, this is where things became different. It doesn't mean that Iran has bad relationship with Armenia, but Iran is managing these differences with Azerbaijan now. Nevertheless, the dam is completely different. There are floods that come from that part of Iran from the east, and these floods create serious damages in Iran among the villages that are in the area, and they cause many casualties among the civilians. And the dam that was built was supposed to stop it and to contribute in the well-being of the population. That is part of the personality of the Iranian president Ibrahim Raisi, who was known as the president of the people. Every Thursday and Friday, he would go to visit a province and be in close contact with the population. And this is why he was popular among the population, because they seen him all the time. They used to visit them and he used to be in close contact. He was very modest, and he showed to the Iranian people that he listens to them, and he can act upon their demand if they have any, because the government is not detached from the population. And this is why President Raisi, for him, was important to go and inaugurate this dam. Now, we can never exclude the possibility of a sabotage, because in any crash, there are always all possibilities on the table.
What can you tell our listeners about the relationship between Israel and Azerbaijan? I think that people get a little bit mixed up because of the religious kind of tensions that are not really that serious in Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's more of an irredentist sort of argument. We have our Orthodox Christians that are supported by Russia and Iran traditionally, and then we have our Azeri Shia Muslims, for the most part, that are supported by Israel and Turkey. Can you explain to our listeners just kind of the economic and military relations between Azerbaijan and Israel, if you could?
Well, militarily, Israel provides Azerbaijan with military hardware, and Turkey has a superiority because it is providing Azerbaijan with drones, and the Turkish drones are very well known of being very advanced. We saw the damage that these drones can have in Syria and along with the Ukrainian army, because Ukraine buys its drones of Turkey. Now, there is an intelligence cooperation with the Azerbaijan and Israel. However, as the Azeri have the upper hand now over the Armenians, and the Armenians have been contained now in the mentality and the objectives of Azerbaijan, the relationship between Azerbaijan and Israel has been going down a few notches. But of course, Azerbaijan sells oil to Israel. Nevertheless, with the normalization of countries like the Emirates, the Israelis have alternatives now. And if the Israelis manage to have normalization relationship with Saudi Arabia, they really don't need Azerbaijan unless Azerbaijan can come up with a very good price of the oil they're selling to Israel. And Israel would buy off the cheapest. Now, Azerbaijan, Russia, and Iran are trying to sort out their differences in relation to energy in the Caspian Sea. This is why the relationship between Azerbaijan and Iran, a neighboring country, and with the number of the Azeri in Iran, and Azerbaijan being the highest second Shia country in Asia, I think the bond between Iran and Azerbaijan is much stronger than the bond between Azerbaijan and Israel, keeping in mind that Israel has excellent relationship with Turkey. Well, not very much in the last month because Turkey changed a little bit its policy when other countries started to impose sanctions on Israel, and when there were voices in Turkey that standing against the Turkish president, and he lost the elections, the municipality elections, and this is why he shifted his policy when Turkey was the first producer and exporter of goods to Israel, even during the first 6 months of the war. However, Iran and Turkey have good relationship. Turkey is a NATO country. NATO is against Iran. It's fighting Iran, is creating havoc in Iran, and yet there are good relationship between Turkey and Iran. So really, Iran has learned to take things depending on the file. So if we agree on in one place and we disagree on another, let us continue disagreeing on one place and agreeing on another. That will not spoil the interest of the relationship.
You touched on a little bit what kind of cultural and sociological implications this has for the people of Iran, the death of the President Raisi. But can you tell us a little bit about the political implications? What's different about his deputy that's now stepped up, or who's now taken on the role? What should we expect from him? Does he kind of keep going in the same vein as Raisi? Is he like very pure? And I do know that they have elections coming up as well. So what can you tell us about those implications?
Well, actually, the first deputy of the late Iranian president, who is today the president for 50 days until the new elections are run in the country, was the one behind the policy of Iran going toward the East and detaching itself of the West. Therefore, it is exactly the same policy as the new president will be adopting, exactly the same as President Raisi has decided to establish good ties with all the people and the countries in the Middle East, in particular Saudi Arabia, allow the nuclear deal and the relationship with the West to continue only if the West wants to abide by the Iranian rules that are very clearly to the West, that the West should respect the Iranian interest and should not fiddle with the Iranian national security, but going totally toward the East, signing strategic deals with Russia and China and the rest of Asia, going toward Africa, going toward Latin America, and really considering the West as a bonus if the West wants to come in, but not cutting the road, but just not really relying on the West, because the West has demonstrated to be unreliable. So President Barack Obama signed the nuclear deal in 2015 and never implemented all the points and the agreement of the nuclear deal, never allowed the bank to restore the relationship with the Central Bank of Iran, etc. Donald Trump came and shredded the nuclear deal in 2018, and he waited by the phone for Iran to call and imposed maximum pressure on Iran and maximum sanctions, and it didn't work. President Joe Biden, so we're talking about the Democrat and then the Republican and then again the Democrat, promised to regain relationship with Iran, to sign the nuclear deal again and put it on the table. And after, we're coming to the end of his terms, and he did not fulfill his promises. Therefore, it is not the identity of the president, it is the policy of the US that is not trustworthy, is not straightforward, and is not looking after its own interest and the interest of the world to have Iran in as a partner and allow, particularly Europe, to have business with Iran. And Europe is dying to return to Iran. And Europe was seriously damaged from not returning to Iran. So this same policy is adopted by the current president ad interim, who's going to look after the country for the next 50 days. And the rapprochement with Russia is increasing, is going to much higher level. The partnership with China is even more. China is buying off Iran the oil, and the Iranians are dealing with the Chinese and with the Russians in local currency, when in the majority of the deals, not all the deals, you still need foreign currency. All countries still need foreign currency. And the relationship with Saudi Arabia, after 40 years of animosity, today has reached a point where they are no longer declared enemies, and they don't need to fight in other theaters, like in Lebanon or in Syria or in Iraq or in Yemen. So this is where we are at.
And also the foreign minister. So foreign minister has really come into his own in the last probably 2 years during the SMO, kind of holding himself up on the likes of Lavrov and Jai Shankar. I mean, he was a fantastic FM, taking a very pivotal role, especially in the beginning with the peace talks and traveling everywhere. This is a juggernaut of foreign policy, almost irreplaceable. What happens next in the foreign ministry in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
That's a fair point. Now, first of all, there is nobody who is irreplaceable in Iran. If the Americans killed Qasem Soleimani, and 100 other Qasem Soleimani are just waiting in a row to take their role and to fulfill their objectives that are set by the Islamic Republic as an institution, as a country with so many human resources. Secondly, yes, it is true that Amir Abdullahian was special because Jawad Zarif was very close to the West and trying to promote the relationship between Iran and the West. Now, this kind of relationship is not bad for Iran. Nevertheless, Jawad Zarif went an extra mile in trusting the West. And what happened? It is the West, it is Donald Trump who gave a huge blow to President Rouhani and his foreign minister Jawad Zarif by tearing up the nuclear deal that promoted and elevated the ruling of President Rouhani and his foreign minister. Today, in theory, the foreign minister should execute the policy of the president. He is not an entity per se. He is not someone who represents, with his ideas, Iran, as Jawad Zarif was trying to portray. That was wrong. Nevertheless, Amir Abdullahian was faithful to the president, was faithful to the institution, and was faithful to the base of the Islamic Republic and was carrying out the objectives of the president to be close to the axis of the resistance, to have Palestine in the heart of the Iranian cause, to support all the neighboring countries around Iran, to support the relationship with Asia, to maintain good relationship with the West if the West is willing to come on equal basis. There is no reason why America should be better than Iran or vice versa, or Europe should be superior above Iran or vice versa. It's always on equal basis. And if they're not interested, Europe and the United States, then they can stay where they are. Iran is increasing the production of oil, has reduced the gap between the devaluation of the tuman from 71% to 46%. I mean, in Turkey, it is 68%, the inflation. And then they're working, because we have to keep in mind, this is a country that has suffered more than 4,600 sanctions starting from the day one of the Islamic Revolution. And we're talking about the era of President Jimmy Carter. And because of that, because Amir Abdullahian was carrying the message as an Islamic revolution and implementing the constitution, Article 151, 153, that Iran supports all the oppressed people around the world, Muslim or non-Muslims. This is why Iran went to Venezuela to look after its refinery and to produce spare part that America refused to provide Venezuela with, to the point that the aim was to impoverish Venezuela. And Iran went and to help Venezuela cross the sea and went there confronting the US sanctions and saying, we do not agree, we do not abide by the unilateral, unlawful US sanctions. So Amir Abdullahian was coming up and was shown as someone who is extremely modest. He didn't work for himself, for his identity, but he's truly carried the message of Iran and showed what Iran's policy is.
Let's debunk just the one major conspiracy theory that's really bothering me. Is that, and the Islamic Republic has actually asked that we don't even perpetuate this, so we're going to debunk it, just to do it, just to add to the many debunks. So this theory that Mossad is involved somehow. The Islamic Republic has said that did not happen. Do not spread that rumor. And I heard you the other day in a space quite exasperated as person after person came up and said it was Mossad, it was Israel, it was Mossad, it was Israel. So really quickly, why should we stay away from that sort of lazy sort of analysis, and what does it, and kind of like how should we approach this?
This is a very important question. I've seen today a space on X saying, who killed the Iranian president? So it is not how he was killed, but who killed the president. So some people are speculating about who is behind the assassination and the sabotage, determining that that was a sabotage. Now, in any crash, in any accident like this one, there are both theories are on the table. First of all, let me say that the helicopter was a US modern helicopter that was bought by the Iranians immediately after 2015, when some of the sanctions were lifted and Iran recovered some of its money. And with the money that was withheld by the Americans, that was in America, part of it, Iran bought some equipment that were needed for Iran. So people who are saying, oh, well, the US is an enemy, why you go and buy a US helicopter? Well, no. In 2015, even Jawad Zarif, they made a statue for Jawad Zarif at the foreign ministry because he has achieved the unachievable. And then the relationship with Iran and the US returned to what looked like on a good path. before the US blew up everything, and before Barack Obama showed his real intention by not opening up to Iran and keeping sanctions, some of the sanctions in. Nevertheless, he has released a lot of money. So the helicopter was a modern VIP helicopters, extremely well equipped. That's point one. Point two, everything happened within 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, because this is the time when the other two helicopters lost the sight. Now, all speculations can be on the table, and this is what the investigation team is putting. First, they collect every single piece of the helicopter, and they have to analyze different possibilities. Why the communication system was interrupted in the air. Now, before you take my words as I am indicating towards something, I'm going to go for the possibility of sabotage that the investigation is going to tackle. There are drones that are capable of electronic warfare that can sabotage the equipment on board. They can cut the communication, and in particular, when it is a US helicopter. In fact, that's my article that I published just an hour ago. So they can cut the communication with the helicopter, and they can even disable the communication system and the control inside the helicopter. That's one. Two, there are electronic warfare. They can inject malware in the system of the helicopter, particularly when every piece in the helicopter is well known to the Americans, because it's an American helicopter and it's a modern one. So they have access to the details of how the helicopter is made inside and what are all the different pieces. And something that the intelligence services do normally is they bring a similar helicopter. Just let us work as a devil advocate, and then they take it into different pieces and they start looking at what is the most vulnerable part of the helicopter and what can be attacked and how without leaving a trace. That is the most important point. But it is not essential, because even by leaving a trace, then how it is possible to define who was behind it and to prove it? Because at the end of the day, you need some proof. So yes, there are possibilities by directing electromagnetic waves, by fiddling with the computer system, by cutting the communication because the communication were cut, and by contributing to the downing of the helicopter. For that, the investigators need to spend a long time to see if they can find traces, because some electronic attacks can be detected. But then the challenge is to find who did it, if that is the case. Now, the other point is also not to disregard, is I know that from experienced pilots, particularly with VIP pilots, that the moment they have a problem, even if there were three, a pilot and a co-pilot and the engineer mechanic that is on board, the moment there is some problem, they don't have the time to launch the Mayday and report what's happening, because they will be extremely busy in trying to deal with the problem that emerged at that moment, because it's impossible to deal with this problem and start launching unless there is enough time. But because they were flying at a normal altitude, not a high altitude, and the instruction was to go to a higher altitude, and this is where everything started to go bad, or this is where the helicopter disappeared, then in this cloud that the commander of Raisi helicopter detected and everybody tried to avoid, this is where everything happened. But then there is another point to take into consideration. It is when the second helicopter returned to look at what happened and to try to identify the problem, there's something that the head of President Raisi's office said. He said it was too dangerous. Now, why was it too dangerous? Because first he said the visibility was good in the air, but the visibility on the ground was not good, because we've seen it when they've sent the first 40 teams, and then they added to that, there became 52, and then later on 72 teams as a rescue teams. And then we know that the drones, the Turkish drone did not find it. The Iranian drone found it only in the morning, early in the morning. So all night, there were many people and many equipments trying to look for the location of the crash, and they couldn't find it. And the last point is all the bodies were found within a normal range, which means that the bodies were scattered when the helicopter was on the ground. It means the fair distance, so they were not in different places, which means the helicopter was not shot down in the air and did not explode in the air or did not burn in the air, because then you would find the bodies within several kilometers if they were injected in the air, and this is when the incident took place. So everything is related to what happened to the helicopter at that particular moment when there was a crash and there was a forceful landing. This is the first information we got in the first minute of the crash. And until now, the Iranian authorities are talking about a crash. They're not talking about the downing of the helicopter. Because going into conclusion that the helicopter was downed, it means someone has a proof of the matter that the helicopter was brought out by military or military aggression, or with a weapon that is electronic or physical weapon. Nobody had this proof yet. So everything going on social media, people are saying the Mossad, the CIA, or we know that this is the only side that they can do it. Of course, Israel promised to retaliate and promised vengeance, but it doesn't mean we can give credit to the Israelis when the Iranians are not saying that that was an act of sabotage or an attack. Why giving any credit to Israel that doesn't deserve it?
I love that. Why give them the credit when they really don't deserve it? And people are asking, like, well, why were they the ones who broke the story of the president died? Because they got lucky. Of course, they're going to say the president died. If they even hear a rumor about the helicopter crash, immediately Israel's going to say the president died. And they say, how did they know? I said, they didn't know. They just got lucky. They do this all the time, sort of thing. I know you're running out of time. So just one last question. What implications, if any, will this have on the war in Palestine?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Because the whole system is still in place. I heard also people trying to pretend to be expert on Iran saying this is going to change. Well, I can tell you these people have no clue, because the axis of the resistance is an organic part of Iran, and Iran is an organic part of the axis of the resistance. The reason why Iran is a regional power today, because it has managed to turn the war in Yemen to its advantage when half of the world was fighting the Yemeni, the poorest people in the Middle East. And today, Yemen, thanks to Iran and thanks to the Yemeni people as well, managed to control not only the Strait of Hormuz, but also Bab el Mandeb and the Red Sea. And because of that, Iran managed to support the Yemeni to stand against the US and the British Navy, the strongest navy in the world. And these are failing to defeat the Yemeni, failing to deter the Yemeni, And every time they try to bomb Yemen, Yemen is more determined to hit not only the Israeli ships, but also the American and the British ship. Now, can you imagine America and the UK putting themselves on the same level as Yemen in their military capability? That is crazy. How Iran can give up on Yemen and how Yemen can give up on Iran. Secondly, Iraq. In 2003, the US invaded Iraq to occupy it. And the next online was Syria and Lebanon and then Iran. These are not my analyses. These are the US General Wesley Clark, the four-star general, who was the commander of European forces, who said that this is what the Pentagon told him. After Iraq is Syria, Lebanon, and Iran. We've seen that happening. And we've seen how the Americans were preparing to go to Syria because after the visit of Colin Powell. Now, in Iraq, the Americans in 2014 wanted the country to be delivered in the hand of ISIS. And they have failed, even if they have not delivered the Iraqi government the weapons that Iraq paid for and was waiting for Barack Obama to deliver these weapons. Iran stepped in, trained the Hashd Shabi that the Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani called for mobilization to support Iraq and to prevent ISIS from occupying the country. This is what the Americans wanted. That gave a golden opportunity for Iran to move in, apart from the ideology. But Iran established a strong foothold in Iraq. How Iraq can give up on Iran and vice versa. In Syria, the Americans wanted to create a failed state. They've established an operational room in Turkey and in Jordan. They've invested hundreds of billions of dollars to create a failed state. They supported Al-Qaeda, that Hillary Clinton and Jack Sullivan said the people who are fighting in Al-Qaeda are in Syria are on our side.
Right.
And Iran, with its allies, managed to defeat them in Syria. How can President Assad today believe in any friends or supporters but Iran and its allies, and how Iran can give up on Syria? Hezbollah, and I'm coming to Palestine. Hezbollah, for the first time, a non-state actor, stands against the strongest army in the Middle East, i.e. Israel, the most coward army in the Middle East, because with all their might, with 450,000 men, 180,000 professionals, and more or less 350,000 reservists. I don't want to mix both to reach the 450, but it's more or less 450. And they cannot defeat not Hezbollah, neither the Palestinians. So Hezbollah stood against Israel on the borders, is fighting it for the last 8 months. And every time Israel dares to cross the line and violate the rules of engagement, Hezbollah treats it in the same way, and Israel is back online and is fighting within the same distance. And Israel is suffering of more than 100,000 Israeli displaced off the Lebanese borders because they have no solution for them in front of few thousands of state actors that have only Iran to support them. How can Iran give up on Hezbollah, and how Hezbollah can give up on Iran? And my last point are the Palestinians. The Palestinians tried everything. They looked for a state in Jordan at the first beginning of the Nakba, and they failed. And then they tried in Lebanon, and they have failed. And they tried to hijack airplane, attack in different parts, do operation in different countries, and they failed. And then they went to the Oslo, and Yasser Arafat accepted to sign the deal. He was cheated by the Americans and by the Israelis. And the deal was the Palestinians will have their state after the Oslo 1 and 2, 1993, 1995, and the Palestinian will have a state in 1995. And Arafat realized that he was lied to. And he participated, well, he organized the second intifada. And he asked Iran for weapons. And Iran sent the Karen A ship to Yasser Arafat that was intercepted in the Red Sea. But that was the decision of the Palestinians to pick up the arms. But then Mahmoud Abbas brought that down. And many other Palestinians refused to submit to the Israelis. And they accepted to offer sacrifices because no revolution can stand without sacrifices. But then many of the Palestinian groups again made a mistake in Syria and went looking for another state outside Palestine. And they have tried the Arab countries, particularly Gulf countries, that supported them in Syria to be sacrificed in Syria. And the Palestinians realized that all these Arab countries want them to die only to create a failed state, and for the Americans to come and take hold of Syria. And Moshe Yaalon, the Israeli defense minister, said that he preferred to have ISIS on his borders, but not Iran. And then Iran moved in and said to the Palestinians, we can fight in Syria, but I still support Palestine because Palestine doesn't belong to you who are fighting outside Palestine. It belongs to all the Palestinians and all those who believe in a just cause. And the Palestinians realized after several years in fighting in Syria, those who fought in Syria, but not all the group, many groups refused, that their cause is Palestine. So they returned and they found Iran. And Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas in Gaza, said overtly, Iran is supporting us financially and is supporting us with all the weapons that we need that can be brought into Gaza, and never ask us to do anything in return. The only country that didn't ask us anything in return. How can the Palestinians today drop Iran or Iran drop the Palestinian? The Palestinian cause is in the heart of the Iranian ideology. This is why, with Raisi, Abdullahian, or without, with Mokhber, the new president, or without, with Bakiri, the new foreign minister, or without, nothing is going to change. On the contrary, the Palestinians proved to be stronger than the Israelis. A non-state actor in a biggest concentration camp that is open in Gaza stood against the Israelis for 8 months, and Israel has failed to deter the Palestinians, to kill Hamas leaders, to curb the Palestinian resistance in Gaza, and to free the prisoners without killing them. So after 8 months, Israel has returned from the third beginning to the north, to the middle, to the south of Gaza, and to Rafah, and nothing has been achieved.
Mm-hmm.
Why the Israelis, why the Iranians would give up on people who are determined to free their land, and why the people who are determined to free their land will give up on the main source of their support in their own cause. That is the answer. What the death of Raisi and Abdullahian will do to Iran and to the axis of the resistance.
Well, thank you very much, Elijah. I know you're incredibly busy this week with all of the MENA happening, so thank you for making the time with us. Please let our listeners know where you would like them to find you and where they can find your new article.
I'm on X, and they can just Google my name and subscribe if they like it.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Elijah, and I will let you go. Enjoy the rest of your week. And guys, please stay tuned. I will have Nick on from RBN tomorrow, Mark Sloboda on Friday, and please enjoy, please stay to watch this video of the funeral of the officials in Iran. Long live the resistance, long live Iran, and long live the Islamic Republic. from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thank you very much, Elijah. We will talk soon, as we always do.
Thank you.